Great. Well, welcome everyone to the March 25th meeting of the Arlington Electoral Board. Welcome. We look forward to talking today about some really important agenda items. First order of business is I'm going to move to adopt the draft meeting minutes from the February 24th Electoral Board meeting. And just a reminder, our meeting minutes are posted on our website, so anytime anyone wants to review them, please feel free to do so. So I will move to adopt the February 24th Electoral Board meeting minutes. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Yeah, I think you might be on mute, so.
All right, Kim, did you say aye?
Yep, I did. Aye.
All right, great. All right, so moving on to our first item, we'll kick it over to our Registrar and Director of Elections, Gretchen Reinemeyer, to give us an update on some of the legislation that moved through the General Assembly this year and what it means for elections this year.
So the good news is that the General Assembly took it easy on us this year. After last year, there were more than 60 bills that were passed last year. And this year it's a much smaller list, but there are some pretty important ones in there. So I'm just going to go through this list very quickly. If anybody does have questions, you can either put them in chat or you can follow up with our office after this meeting. So HB 1810 is voter registration, and it's the failure of the online voter registration system. What this bill does is grant the governor the authority to extend the voter registration deadline in the event that the voter registration system fails the last day of voter registration, which has happened twice in Virginia now. So this one has been signed by the governor. It is good to go. The next bill, HB 1888, we'll talk about this one in more detail. This is an overhaul of vote by mail absentee procedures in Virginia, and this one has not yet been signed by the governor, but we anticipate that it will be. HB 1890 is similar to a Senate bill that we'll talk about later, but this is one of those the Virginia voter registration. Voting Rights Act bill, but we'll talk about that with the Senate bill a little bit later. HB 1921 deals with curbside voting, and it requires us to put a sign outside of polling locations informing voters of how to notify the precinct if they want a curbside ballot. So we will have to put some signs outside of our precincts to notify voters. This one has been signed. So if you see a little check in the status, that means it has been signed by the governor and is ready for enactment on July 1st of this year. HB 1968 gives localities the option to conduct early in-person voting on Sundays. It is not a requirement, it is an option. HB 2020, this requires that candidates in a running for local office in a district, HB 2020 is the, so Matt, help me with this one. It is the, political parties can no longer, it basically forces a primary for political parties.
Yeah,
they can no longer use a method. Yeah.
Yeah, it essentially says that for a political nomination process run by a party, they have to have access for absentee voting or for military voters, overseas voters. Obviously, since it would be very difficult to do that for a convention or a caucus run by a local party, I think the effect of this is essentially will require primaries for nominating methods. I don't think it goes into effect until 2024.
No, it has a delayed implementation for quite some years. So, yeah, and it has not been signed yet. HB 2081 prohibits firearms inside of polling places. This is an equal protection one. So currently Arlington does not allow firearms in polling locations because we have an ordinance banning firearms from public buildings, and that includes polling locations on election day. Other localities in Virginia do not have the same protection, so this just creates that protection for all localities in Virginia. HB 2125 allows pre-registration for 16-year-olds. and then they would become automatically registered when they turn 18. I'm not sure what HB 2138 has to do with elections. This was flagged by the VRAV, our Registrars Association, so I'm just going to skip that one. HB 2198 is so local elections. It requires that if you're running for office in a local election that has districts, that the voters who are voting, that you have to be a qualified voter of that district. And so this one doesn't apply to Arlington since we do not currently have districts. Senate Bill 1097 was introduced by Barbara Favola from the Arlington delegation, and this one has been signed, but the bill did change a lot from its original introduction. So what it does is it grants the governor to remove the witness requirement in cases of public health emergencies. But it also starts a study so that we can find another way to add a protection in place to make sure that it is the voter marking their ballot that might not necessarily be a witness signature. But at this point in time, witness signatures are still required moving forward. Senate Bill 1111 removes the authority that election officers had on election day to basically they had the authority of police officers on election day, and it removes that those powers from them. So now we have to call the police department should there be a disruption at the polling location, which is what we did in Arlington anyway. Senate Bill 1148 moves the date of the June primary from the second Tuesday in June to the third Tuesday in June. So this year, because none of these bills go into effect until July 1st, this year the June primary is on June 8th, but starting next year it will be on the third Tuesday in June. And the reason that they are shifting the date of the primary is to avoid, hopefully avoid conflicting with students being in school in June. I'm not sure how this will work in Arlington because our schools still run pretty late, but we still have school in session the third Tuesday in June, but we'll see how that lines up with the school schedule. Senate Bill 1157 moved all town elections in Virginia from May to November. And this one has caused a little bit of a problem for some of our neighbors, but since Arlington County does not have towns, this does not impact us. Senate Bill 1239 allows us to outsource mailing of mail ballots. Currently, all mail ballots had to be mailed in-house, and it's a very labor-intensive process that did not lend itself to automation. So Senate Bill 1248 will allow us to, Senate Bill 1239 will allow us to contract with the vendor to handle that mailing process for us. And hopefully it might reduce costs. It will definitely reduce workload on our office, hopefully. Senate Bill 1245, and let's see, it allows for ballot drop-off locations. This is similar to HB 1888, and that's the one that I'm going to talk about. Senate Bill 1281 removes the residency requirement for general registrars in certain localities. I believe it's under 25,000 registered voters, so that registrar no longer has to live in that city or county. Senate Bill 1331 is also included in HB 1888, but that I'll talk about here in a minute. Let's see, Senate Bill 1395, I'll talk about some more in a minute. This is the Virginia Voting Rights Act, if you will. And then the SJ 272 is, let's see, I believe this is the constitutional amendment to grant felons the right to vote. So are there any questions before I move on? I can't see the questions in chat, Eric, so if you want to grab those and answer questions from raised hands. The way I'm sharing my screen right now, it's not showing me that option.
Gotcha.
The only thing I'll ask is, well, thank you for providing the overview. It was very helpful. And I know we'll talk about 1395 and HB 1888 in a few minutes. But I know there's some bills that passed last year that that with delayed implementation. I don't know. Yep, there you go.
Yeah. So are there any other questions about bills last session before we move on to these?
Nothing in the chat, by the way.
Okay, thank you. The big bill that is coming that passed last year with delayed implementation until this July is the permanent absentee voter list. So basically this will allow voters in Virginia to apply to be on a mailing list and have a ballot mailed to them automatically for every election. In order to be removed from this list, the voter has to write to us and say, please remove me from the permanent absentee mailing list. If the registration is canceled or placed in inactive status, they would be removed. Or if a ballot is sent to them and returned as undeliverable. In this case, we do reach out because there are known mail issues. We do reach out to voters that we receive ballots back with them returned as undeliverable. Prior to just canceling them and removing them from the list, we would initiate contact with them to make sure that it wasn't an error on the post office. And then if a voter moves to a new address in a different locality, that will remove them from the permanent absentee voter list. So we haven't really gotten guidance on this because it's not going to affect until July 1, but we will be doing a push in July 1 to let voters know about their option to be placed on this list. The other bill that was delayed implementation is the ranked choice voting pilot program for all localities in Virginia. So this one, currently Arlington County is the only county allowed to do ranked choice voting, but this new code section will open it up to every locality in Virginia. Also last year, the State Board of Elections was extended from a 3-member board to a 5-member board. I'm not sure if or when we'll see the 5 members appointed to the state board. I've not heard of anything, but it's possible that there's something I have missed. The other bill that it didn't pass last year, but it goes into effect starting July 1, 2021, is the elimination of split precincts. So, and this has to do with redistricting, is they wanted us to no longer have split precincts after redistricting. Because redistricting has been pushed back will be a year at this point, we're not sure how this will impact us in Arlington. We have been told that the Department of Elections is going to submit a waiver on behalf of all split precincts in the Commonwealth to allow these until after redistricting. We do have one split precinct in Arlington, precinct 27. But it's split between the 47th and 49th House districts. And until we hear otherwise, we are not changing that precinct at this point in time. Any questions about these bills?
Yeah, still no chat or hands up or anything. Just a reminder for those of you that are on the phone, there's 3 people on the phone in this meeting, so you have to press *6 if you want to ask a question. Mike actually has his hand up now.
Okay.
So, good evening. Thanks for going through this. Do we anticipate the ranked choice voting will be implemented for the general election this fall?
In Arlington, that is unlikely, and that is because we already have a candidate who's filed to run for the county board seat in the fall, and what we're proposing doing is changing the rules on the midstream, but this is a county board decision. It is entirely within their purview to implement ranked choice voting. So.
Have these issues been discussed in public yet, or how do we know that the county board will not be voting in favor of this?
I have not discussed. I received a question from the county board member Crystal during our budget work session last week, but I have not heard anything more on ranked choice voting from county board members.
Could you explain again the reason why you said there's one candidate, and could you explain that again?
So we already have started the election cycle for the November election. Candidates have already filed to be on the ballot under the existing rules for that office of county board race. And what we're proposing to do is change the rules on that candidate who has filed on how their office appears on the ballot. And ranked choice voting, it's better just to start a cycle with so that everybody, both the candidates and the public and everybody understands the rules of how they will be elected at the start of the cycle for that election seat. And the reason that I personally would recommend it is I haven't read the story yet, but I did see something out of New York where candidates in New York are contesting the ranked choice voting election that they just had. So in order to protect ourselves, once again, this is a county board decision at this point, though.
Thank you.
Okay.
But yeah, I'll just, I think, reiterate that, if the county board, if and when the county board adopts an ordinance implementing ranked choice voting in Arlington, our job is to implement it, and we'll do it obviously in a very fair, efficient, and effective way.
Yeah. Thank you, Matt. So moving on to HB 1888. So I'm calling this the mail ballot bill, and this is where we're seeing a lot of the reform or measures that were introduced in the special session last August. We're now seeing these put into law. So for the November election last year, there were a lot of temporary measures put in place for the November election only. And those included the ability for voters to cure their ballots. So this requires us to, upon receiving a mail ballot, we have to review it. And if there are any deficiencies, we have to contact the voter to notify them of any missing information. This new HB 1888 also allows drop boxes, so voters can return their ballots via a drop box. This also mandates pre-processing of ballots for all localities. Currently, not every locality does pre-processing or they don't even have a central absentee precinct where they can pre-process mail ballots. But this bill will require that for everyone. This will require us to report in-person results, so early voting results separately from other absentee results. And this does introduce an ADA option that allows voters to vote from home independently without assistance. This was introduced late last year in the form of a lawsuit, actually. So they're just putting in law some of the remedies that were put in place last fall. And then HB 1888 also removes vote in person restrictions for first-time voters. So currently, if you registered to vote by mail in Virginia, you could not vote by mail in your first election in a state election. You could for a federal election, but not a state election. So we would have to notify voters. We would have to deny voters applications for mail ballots if they had not voted in person or registered in person in Virginia. So this removes that vote in person requirement. It's important to note that this bill does not go into effect until July 1st of this year. So currently, all of the things on this list are not in place for the June 8th primary at this point in time. There are provisions, all of these things listed here are in a budget amendment that is waiting for the governor to sign when he approves the budget. We do not know if that will be signed before we start voting on April 23rd or if it will be signed after we start voting on April 23rd. So it is entirely possible that when we go to mail ballots, we will not be able to have our drop boxes open. So I just want to make sure that's really clear to everyone that we might have to start the June 8th election cycle without some of these mail ballot provisions in place.
Yeah, and kind of building on that, Gretchen, I believe the reconvene session is April 7th. Is that right? So obviously the governor is going to have amendments to the budget, and then the General Assembly will either vote for them or vote them down, and then he'll have 30 days to either sign the budget or make more recommended amendments. But my understanding is whenever he signs the budget, it goes into effect immediately, right? So if he signed the budget on April 20th, and that means these provisions would be in effect on April 20th, right?
Yes, that is correct. So it's one of those things that we're going to have to, and I just want to make this clear, we're going to have to take some of these options off of our website because drop boxes are not going to be, they are not allowed at this point in time. So I'm not going to be able to put that on our website. The second the governor signs that budget bill, then we are going to open up our drop boxes and make the information available on our website. This also goes for the witness requirement. We anticipate the witness requirement being removed for the June 8th primary, but we do not at this point in time know when that budget amendment will be signed. So we're probably going to, depending on, just because of timing, we have to get these things prepared and ready in the mail. We're probably going to have to send out instructions that say the witness is required, and we'll have a buck slip, so an extra sheet of paper in there, so that when that budget amendment is passed, we can then start notifying voters that the witness is no longer required because of the pandemic. Does that make sense?
Yeah. My question about that is I think the budget amendment and then this bill and Senator Favolla's bill removes the witness requirement during a public health emergency. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So if by the time we have the November general election, we're no longer in an emergency, that means the witness requirement would be in effect, right?
That is correct.
Okay.
So.
And then the other comment I have here is, reporting in-person results separately from other absentee voting, absentee ballots. Most of you may recall last year, results in Virginia and in many other states were not released until very late on election day into Wednesday. And the reason for that was because we had so many early votes, both in person and by mail. Arlington was unique because we actually released the early voting in-person results like at 8 o'clock. Gretchen, was it 8:30?
It was 7:30, and we actually released all ballots that had been processed through Monday before the election. So that included all of the mail ballots that we had processed, and that was 102,000 votes, give or take a few. So
yeah, so we got our results released pretty quickly on election night, but many other localities, including Fairfax, didn't release their numbers until midnight or later on election night. So this would hopefully make it so that results are announced earlier, to the extent that's possible.
Yeah, and I think, so the reason this becomes important is because last year, one of the bills that was introduced is that we can accept mail ballots through the Friday after the election, as long as they were postmarked by 7 p.m. election day. And so what happened in Arlington is we added between election night, we added around 6,000 votes to that absentee total. Those weren't all from late arriving mail ballots because some came from the precincts that day. Some we just hadn't had time to tabulate on election day. Then that's why we need to get those in-person numbers. In theory, you should have those in-person numbers at 7 p.m. when polls close. There is no need to wait until the Friday after the election to release those numbers. So, yeah.
All right, well, that's all I had. I don't know, Kim or Scott, do you have any questions or comments on this bill?
Thanks. I think you've covered things well. I think the description that Gretchen's given of this one and the other one have been excellent. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, I agree. I don't have any questions on this bill either.
Okay. Moving on to Senate Bill 1395. Matt and Scott have both been kind enough to review this today and matched up against the Voting Rights Act. And in many ways, the language is from the Voting Rights Act, the federal bill passed. One of the key differences is that this requires us to make materials available in a minority language if 5% of the population or more than 10,000 voters speak that language. And so I've included the link to if you can find Arlington census data here, because one of the questions that came up is, would Arlington be required to translate materials into Spanish under this bill? And the way I am reading the census data is currently we do not. We only have around 7,000 voters who speak Spanish as their primary language and do not speak English very well. But depending on how you interpret the census data, it may or may not have implications for Arlington. This also reinstates the pre-clearance process. So we'll, anytime we go to make a change to a precinct's boundaries or polling place, we would have to submit that through a review process to make sure that we weren't impacting a protected class. I'm sure there are questions on this one, so yeah.
Yeah, well, I'll just make a few quick comments before we go into questions. Yeah, so I think this bill does a few different things. The first is it basically reiterates Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. In the Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, obviously, has been around since the late 60s, and it's been heavily litigated in the courts. So there's pretty clear guidance in the courts about what this bill would require. And then the pre-clearance requirement is a state level pre-clearance requirement. So, you know, anytime we change polling places or change the method of voting, anything like that, we have to pre-clear it and provide notice to the public and give them an opportunity to weigh in. This is unique because this used to be done at the federal level, at the Department of Justice, the Civil Rights Division, the Voting Rights Section. That was struck down in 2013 in the Shelby County versus Holder Supreme Court case. I was actually an intern in this section of the DOJ back in college, so I've got to be one of the few people in the country with an unconstitutional internship on their resume. But I think, you know, the way I see it, like for the pre-clearance and the public notice requirements, we're already kind of doing this.
Yes.
So it's nothing huge. There is a provision about pre-clearing some of this with the Attorney General, which obviously hasn't been done before, and I don't know what that would look like, but I don't think this will have a huge impact on what we do day to day.
Carol
Madam, I
has
can
her
add
question
this.
up, by the way, hand up, by the way.
So I understand that if there are 10,000 voters who speak a language, that you would be required to have the materials available in that language. Does it allow you to make your own decision if there are fewer than 10,000? I mean, can you go ahead and do that on your own, or are you only allowed to do it if there are 10,000?
So this is a good question because under the Voting Rights Act, we had to seek pre-clearance to translate materials into a language that was not covered. And Arlington did do this for Spanish translations. So I did not see anything in this bill that would match the provisions in the Voting Rights Act. So I do not think there's anything that prohibits us from offering materials available in other languages. Does that make sense? Okay.
That does make sense. Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah.
We already do a lot of that already, right, Gretchen?
We do. So we do. So available at every polling location, we do have a translation of the ballot into Spanish. We make that available at every polling location in Arlington. We make an effort to have Spanish translators or Spanish speaking election officers at polling locations where we know we have a higher concentration of Spanish speakers. We have one precinct where we get a request to have Vietnamese and Korean at, actually Glen Carlin, your precinct, Matt. So we make an effort to have those two languages at that precinct as well. What else? We also have materials available on our website. The county is going to go through a new website process. So what we have right now is not as robust as it will be come this fall. So.
And Madam, wanted to add, the federal pre-clearance became very cumbersome in terms of every time we wanted to change a precinct or do something that made perfect sense and in no way could be whatsoever thought to be discriminatory, even to change a precinct name or the boundaries. And it was a 90-day period. So this state process has got to be better. I mean, we may not think it's necessary, but it certainly is more reasonable to have to do anything if there is to be any pre-clearance. A whole lot easier and better to have it done at the state level, particularly with officials who are familiar with where we're located. Thanks.
Okay. Kim, did you have any questions?
No, I do not.
Okay. We can move. So that is all I have for legislation. So we will move on to, I've identified some key dates for the June 8th Democratic primary. So the filing deadline was at 5 p.m. today. Candidates had to file with their respective parties. And so we are waiting right now for the parties to certify their lists. They have a week to do this. And then we will have the list of candidates available and we can start designing the ballots. So I'm putting April 15th as an estimate of when we'll have sample ballots available because those ballots, once we design them, they have to be routed through the Department of Elections for approvals to make sure they're complying with the ballot standards in Virginia. So it does take a little bit of time to get an approved ballot ready for our website. So just please be patient with us. Next, we will be running logic and accuracy testing of our voting equipment on April 20th at our warehouse, and we will be sending official notice out on that. Ballots will be mailed and early voting starts at Courthouse on April 23rd, that Friday. On May 26th and June 1st, we will start pre-processing mail ballots. There, I had another date in there that got dropped, but and we'll be publishing the pre-processing schedule on our website. And then we are required to be open for 2 Saturdays for early voting on May 29th and June 5th. So we'll be opening up for those 2 Saturdays. We will be closed on May 31st for Memorial Day. So we do have to be open the Saturday of that weekend, but we do not have to be open for that Monday. And then the election date is obviously June 8th, which means the provisional ballot meeting will be on June 9th, and we will conclude the canvass on June 12th, most likely. So with this said, one of the topics for conversation for the Electoral Board was going to be the schedule for the satellite early voting locations. So we will be opening 2 early voting locations. And we had not determined the hours for those locations. So Matt, if you want to take over.
Sure. All right. Well, moving on. The county board at its March hearing voted to open up 2 satellite voting locations for the June primary in the November general election. One at Walter Reed in South Arlington, one in Madison in North Arlington. So our job is to set the days and times for when that voting will occur. So Gretchen, if you want to move on to the next slide with the proposals, I'm guessing.
No, I do not have.
Okay.
Sorry, I will go on to the next agenda item after that. So, so we have to open. So my proposal was, obviously Walter Reed is being used as a vaccine site right now. And there is the senior center end of that facility that we could make use of, but we have not been able to get confirmation that we can use that end of the facility, and we have been reaching out to them for about 2.5 months now. We're not sure if we can overlap with the vaccine clinics or not at this point, unfortunately. So my recommendation would be to start to open up the other locations on May 29th and June 5th. And then if we wanted to do something during that last week, what we usually do, what we've done in the past is we've remained open late Tuesday and Thursday. So we could stay open late or we could open them 2 to 7 on, let's see, June 1st and June 3rd, and that's where if the county board has a preference, let me know.
So one thing that I'll flag is obviously we'll have Saturday voting for the June primary, but we're going to have a day of Sunday voting in the November general. Gretchen mentioned earlier there's a bill passed this year that allows for Sunday voting. We're pretty sure this was allowed already under existing law, but this clarifies that we can do it. And I know as part of the budget process, we are likely going to be authorized to hire an early voting coordinator starting July 1st.
Yeah.
And assuming that happens, we could hire this person and they'll be in charge of organizing early voting for the November general election. So we will have a Sunday day of voting for the first time, I believe, at least in very recent history, for the November general election.
That is up for discussion and pending approval of all board members, so.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. But I don't know, Gretchen, do you want to summarize the days and times, and then I can make a motion?
Well, so it's one of those, I would be interested in hearing from Scott and Kim. Are you guys open to just doing the Saturdays? Do you want to try to do Tuesday and Thursday during the week, that last week at these locations? I will say we are legally required to be open that Saturday for Memorial Day, but I do not anticipate many people coming out. But I don't know, maybe people will be in town that weekend, so. Yeah.
Scott or Kim, do you have any comments?
I actually do. If we could do a Tuesday and Thursday, just to have, the more hours that we can provide, the better, for people to be able to vote.
So when we do Tuesdays and Thursdays, so to give people the evening options, we find it doesn't, when we've done satellites in the past, in 2012, we opened them at 8 a.m. And we were just dead the first few hours. So in 2016 and last year, we didn't open them until 2 p.m. And we found that we actually did the same number of voters in a day in a much more compressed time period. And so we could be open 2 to 7 without having to go into as much overtime and things like that. So my recommendation would be 2 to 7 for that Tuesday and Thursday,
Okay.
just so we can get some evening hours for those that are working an 8 to 5 schedule.
Yeah, I'm fine with those hours.
Okay.
Yes, I'm fine with those too. And recall, Gretchen, what you mentioned about the spread of the voters during the day. So I think that makes the most sense, and to assure the evening time, yes.
So what I'm looking at, so just to summarize, I have May 29th and June 5th, and we're required to be open 8 hours on those days. So we've been doing 9 to 5 on those 2 Saturdays. And then Tuesday and Thursday, open at the satellites 2 to 7. Is that correct?
I think, yes, I think so.
What day would that be in June? It'd be Tuesday.
June 1st. It would be Tuesday, June 1st and Thursday, June 3rd.
Okay. And can you summarize what the hours would be for the courthouse location?
So courthouse location is open during normal business hours. So we're 8 to 5 on Monday through Friday, starting on April 23rd. We do find it better to, if we're keeping the satellites open till 7, we'll go ahead and keep courthouse open to 7. So we just find it easier for messaging if we can have consistent hours between the 3 sites. So it would be open 8 to 7 on that Tuesday and Thursday.
All right. So to summarize what I see here, we would have Saturday. Yeah, so we have Saturday voting on May 29th and June 5th. And that'd be from 8 hours. So 9 to 5, or what would the hours be there?
In June 5th.
Typing something. Who's on? I just want to see who's on.
Is that right? We would be open 9 to 5 on Saturday, May 29th and June 5th at the satellites?
Yeah.
Okay. And then we would be open on June 1st and Tuesday, June 1st and Thursday, June 3rd from 2 to 7 at the satellite locations.
Yes.
And then we would be open from 8 to 5 starting April 23rd, Monday through Friday at the courthouse location, but then we'd stay open till 7 on June 1st and 3rd.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, let me try to put together a motion here.
Sorry, I'm writing this down. It's starting April 23rd.
Scott, Kim, do you have any other thoughts while I'm typing this up?
I would just say I think that Gretchen's noting the hours of the courthouse plaza time, those daytime hours compensate for not having the same at the satellite, in view of the conversation we had about that earlier. So I think it's a good balance and calculated, I think, very well, looking at the turnout 4 years ago, last year, in between, and what makes sense for this time around. Thanks.
I am concerned that Walter Reed isn't getting back to you, Gretchen,
I
about
am too.
the
Yeah.
space. Please let us know if you need help shaking that loose, so we can get that confirmed as a space.
I do know that Walter Reed is not current. So I think we all know the issue with the vaccine sites. If you're in Arlington at all, by this point you realize they're probably working on a week by week schedule. So they honestly don't, it's not even that they aren't getting back to us. I don't think they know what that first week in June is going to look like for them. So asking them to predict that far ahead is not something that they're capable of doing at this point in time. But I do think I did talk to them. They are using the gym. So they're using the places we would normally use, but there is the other end of Walter Reed where there's the senior center. And I believe there's even a separate entrance that we can use for that senior center. And assuming the senior center programs are not in place, then there will be a room down on that end that we can have a separate entrance for voters. So, yeah. And we would only be overlapping this on these Tuesdays and Thursdays from that 2 to 5 period. So worst case scenario, we might have to reduce from 2 to 7 from 5 to 8 those days. But the Walter Reed clinics are not running on Saturdays at this point in time. So I think we can hold firm that they try to keep them closed on Saturdays if at all possible. So.
Okay, thanks for that.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to suggest a motion, and then I don't know if anyone in the audience has any comments or questions, and then we can move to a vote. So I move to approve early voting at Courthouse Plaza starting Friday, April 23rd for the hours of 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, and 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. on Tuesday, June 1st and Thursday, June 3rd. And early voting at the Madison and Walter Reed satellite voting locations on Saturday, May 29th and Saturday, June 5th from the hours of 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. and Tuesday, June 1st and Thursday, June 3rd from the hours of 2 p.m. to 7 p.m. These hours are subject to change upon the vote of the Electoral Board.
And I'll second the motion.
All right. So I guess at this point we could open up for discussion with the board or take comments and questions from the audience. I see Howard has his hand up.
Thanks, Matt. I recognize this is kind of a done deal, but does anybody on the board or does Gretchen have any insights as to why the county board chose the Madison Center rather than Langston Brown as one of the two satellite locations, given that Langston Brown is really more centrally located in the northern half of the county?
Yeah, I can answer that. So that was based on my recommendation. Langston Brown is a school, and when we started looking at early voting sites, we decided we cannot combine students and voters for a lot of different reasons. And thankfully in the fall, we were able to use Langston because their level 2 students didn't return until the week after the election. But now that Langston Brown is back with students in session, it does not make for a convenient early voting site. We are optimistic to be able to move into Lover Run in the future, but obviously, if you've been out to Lover Run yet, it is not, we cannot overlap with that vaccine clinic at all. So, yeah.
Yeah, I just got vaccinated at Lumber Run. It's a busy place.
It's, yeah, and we can, and it's, there are certain things that we, at this point, we have to let the vaccine clinics take priority over early voting for this primary. So.
Great. That answers my question. Thank you, Gretchen. I have one other question on an unrelated subject. Can I ask questions when we're sort of towards the end of the agenda?
Absolutely.
Sure.
Thanks.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Gretchen, Scott, and Kim, I don't think we've had satellite voting locations for a gubernatorial year or non-presidential year.
This is the first, yes, that is correct. This is the first, we've only run satellites in the past in 2012, 2016, and 2020 for the presidential election. So
Yeah.
This is the first, and it will be a learning, this will be an experiment to see what is the correct level of hours that we need to offer for our voters. So.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, and we will do this exercise again for the November general election, probably in what, August or September, sometime around that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
August would be better than September. So.
All right, so I don't, Kim or Scott, any other comments?
Nope, no other comments.
And I'm fine. Again, I think it's a balance. I think it's been thought through as best as Gretchen can and we can in terms of what will make sense this year, and we'll learn from it and apply it in the future. Thanks.
Yep. And again, stay tuned for a potential day of Sunday voting in the fall once we meet and consider the days and times then. All right, so I made a motion. It's been seconded. So take a vote now. All those in favor, say aye.
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 All right, great.
Okay.
And Gretchen, I'll send you my motion if that's helpful.
Thank you so much. That will be helpful. Unanimous. Okay. So moving on to the final agenda on our items. So Kim, I don't know if you want to introduce this topic, but this is a question that you received from the community.
Yes, it is. So I actually had an Arlingtonian, and she's on this call, I believe, reach out to me about renaming a precinct. And this is the Glebe precinct, which actually votes at Drew Elementary School. The first exchange was about changing it to Green Valley, but now it seems that the community has decided that Drew would be a better name for the precinct. So I just wanted to have a discussion with the community here, the people on the call, about what's involved in that change name, and to see if this is something that we can do when we are reviewing our precincts.
So the first part, one of the questions was also how are our precincts named? So I thought I would start there. Because if you know where Drew is, it doesn't make a ton of sense for it to be called Glebe. Our precincts have a variety of names. So sometimes it's based on the neighborhood that they're located in, or they were located in when the precinct was first created. So we have precincts like Ashton Heights, Aurora Hills, Park Lane is a neighborhood that actually no longer exists, but it's a historic name. Sometimes they're named after the street where it's located. So 49 Monroe is on Monroe Street in Wilson. More recently, the former Director of Elections, Linda Lindbergh, and I were working to have the names of precincts based off their location. So we have things like Navy League, Central Library, AUSA, Met Park, and Garfield Park. Those are the names of the buildings where they're located. And both of these naming systems have flaws with them. So on the neighborhood and street side, so as was done with Ballston, if Ballston votes at Arlington Traditional School, which is off of George Mason Drive, which is not in the neighborhood we traditionally identify as Ballston now. And that's because when we created the other precincts that are now in Ballston, they were pulled out of this original Ballston precinct. So it can be a little bit it can be a little bit confusing naming a precinct after a neighborhood, because that neighborhood boundary doesn't always overlap with where the precinct boundaries are. And as the precinct boundaries shift, that no longer reflects the neighborhood shift. Naming buildings after locations is also problematic because the school system likes to change the names on schools over the summer. And that requires us to go behind and correct the changes behind them. So going on to the second piece of that is what is the process to change the name of the precinct? So precinct names are listed in the ordinance that is approved by the county board for all of our precincts and their boundaries. So in order to change a precinct name, someone has to submit a report to the county board. Traditionally, that has been our office, but there's no legal requirement for us to be the office that introduces it. So we have to submit a report to the county board. The county board will vote to approve what's called a request to advertise. And that change will be advertised for 30 days. The 30-day requirement is really just because the board only meets once every 30 days or once a month. So once that change has been advertised, the county board then votes to approve the change. And this is important. No changes can be made 60 days for a general election. So if we're wanting a change made for the November election, because the county board doesn't meet in August and their September meeting is too close to the general election, we actually have to have changes to the county board by the first week in June so that they can be approved by their July board meeting. And I know there are going to be questions, so we can go ahead and open it up for questions.
Thank you, Gretchen. And I would just add for those on the call who may not have reason perhaps to know that we were steady at 39 precincts for about 40 years, and we have seen the number grow exponentially since then as we've made every effort over the years, along with our predecessors on the board, to consider the size of the precincts and to consider all that goes into those locations that are often not easy to find. And I appreciate Kim's bringing this initiative forward, and think that we'll certainly have a good opportunity to consider what would be the most appropriate name should Glebe Precinct be renamed.
Yeah.
So thank you, Kim, for that, and thank you, Gretchen, for the attention you've given. We've again tried to do what we could to find names that are fitting, that make the most sense at the time, and sometimes have to be revisited. Thanks.
Yeah. And I will say, for our purposes internally, we recognize the confusion that our precinct names, they actually can cause confusion internally for planning. And Glebe Precinct has been on our list to change when the opportunity presents itself. We don't normally, because it is such a long process to have a precinct change to the precinct ordinance, we don't submit changes unless there really is a reason to, like we have to redraw the boundary lines or move a polling location. But I'm sure, so Glebe Precinct is also, we vote at Glebe Elementary School, which is all the way up on North Glebe. And it just, for our sense, it never made sense that Glebe Precinct was not at Glebe School. It just causes a lot of confusion internally. So we do want to change this. We're just not sure what the right timing is. So.
Yeah, and I would certainly be supportive of changing the name based on the community's feedback and recognizing the processes we'd have to go through. I guess the question I have is, tying this back to the legislation we talked about earlier, HB 1395. If we did this after July 1st, so it would have to be next year, I guess. It would have to go through the pre-clearance, right? Most likely. Any
changes to the ordinance would have to go through a pre-clearance process.
Yeah, but if we did it in June, if we were able to do it, get to the county board in June somehow, then it wouldn't, because the bill doesn't go into effect until July, right?
That's correct. It does not go into effect until July. Okay. So I think it's also important to note there is a cost to changing the precinct name, and and that's because everything that goes out to a precinct is labeled with that precinct name, and it is actually a lot of work to go through changing a precinct name. So we do, and I know Eric and I have talked about this internally. We have the opportunity next year with redistricting. We will have to review every precinct in Arlington County, and we will have to make pretty substantial changes. I mean, we don't know what redistricting will look like, but that is the time that we do a pretty thorough review of all of our precincts, polling locations, name changes, and things like that. So it would be easy to submit name changes like this when we get to that redistricting process in a year. So.
Yeah.
And Matt, I'd suggest that while normally we would have the census numbers, have had the census numbers sooner and have the lines redrawn, particularly in time, usually for the House delegates elections this year, that next year is, I think, a good year to consider all of this at once. As Gretchen says, it requires the mailings and proper notification. And yes, we would have to do the pre-clearance. I think there's an advantage in terms of making certainly a great number of changes to do that next year in what will be probably may well be the lowest turnout year in the cycle, and would give us an opportunity to get the community accustomed to new lines, new names in advance of the House of Delegates and the Senate and the constitutional offices all being on the ballot in 2023, and certainly in time before the presidential election of 2024. So I think while normally, again, it would be this year, that next year probably is a better year to do it, to give us more time to think about it and plan and follow all the steps we need to. Thanks.
Yep, I think that makes sense. And maybe if we're doing all this kind of as a package next year, because of redistricting, if we could identify which precincts we think would make sense to change in advance of that, it would maybe be a good way to, tie this into our outreach plan and talking to communities about what the names could potentially be. Not giving them carte blanche, but getting some feedback might be helpful. But
yeah, Eric and I, so what's used in actually a lot of places is they really just call them by their number. So precinct 1. Because like I said, there are problems no matter which naming convention you really choose. And when we're communicating with voters, they tend not to know which precinct they're in, but if you ask them where they vote, they can always answer that question. So for us, it's almost an internal mechanism used to identify precincts rather than one that a voter uses on a day-to-day basis. So it's just something to consider as we move forward.
Yeah,
so.
I was just going to chime in regarding that. The other jurisdictions that I'd worked in, they just use numbers and most of the voters don't know I don't think the numbers or the names. It's something for internal efficiency that helps, but I think most voters their question is, where do I go to vote? What elementary school, what church, what facility? I remember when I first arrived, I was a little confused by the names because that was something that was kind of new. It was new to me. I don't know that there aren't other jurisdictions that don't have that, but yeah, I don't know that voters necessarily know that information. I'm sure the really engaged ones do.
All right, well, I guess stay tuned, and we'll revisit this later, but thank you, Kim, for bringing it to our attention.
And I don't know if there are questions from the community members from Green Valley who are here today, if they wanted to ask anything. Okay.
Laverne has her hand up there.
Okay, I just want to thank Kim Phillips for working along with us, and also thank you, the board members. I understand the reason for change, waiting for next year to change it, and we really appreciate you taking this time to listen to our suggestions, and we would like to change it to Drew. And we thank you.
Thank you so much. We do recognize there are, and I'll just reiterate, there are a lot of whatever naming convention we go with, there are a lot of confusing names, and this precinct 30 glebe has been kind of on our hit list to change when the opportunity presents itself, just because it does conflict with where glebe school is. We have a lot of these situations where it does it. So Taylor School is not Taylor Precinct, which is at the Jefferson, which is not Thomas Jefferson School. So there's just, we have a real opportunity next year to kind of do an overhaul of these names. So. Okay.
All right, I think we just have one more item on the agenda.
Oh, the outreach plan. So I'm sorry I did not get to a slide on that today. So I just wanted to provide an update on, so we have, so with the suggestion of Kim, we have reached out to Arlington Independent Media to work on this docuseries, but I need to follow up with them again because for whatever reason, we weren't able to sync up the last time we were communicating. But one of the suggestions that we had for outreach this year was to kind of work on this behind the scenes. This is Matt's suggestion. I don't know if you want to talk about it or if you would like me to.
Sure. So yeah, I had the suggestion that we have some of our staff working together a docuseries kind of explaining the electoral process from beginning to end. One of the takeaways I had from last year's election, not so much here, but certainly at the state level and definitely the national level, is kind of a lack of understanding of how elections work and how election administration happens. So we would have it a docuseries kind of explaining voter registration, early voting, what the canvas is, how provisional voting works, all of that stuff. So we could have it on our website, and really people can, if they're confused about how the process works, can watch the video and really, get up to speed on the nuts and bolts of how elections are run in Arlington. So, it's certainly a goal to get this up, I think, at some point this year, but Kim, through her good work and connections at Arlington Independent Media, suggested working with them to do the actual recording. So stay tuned, but hopefully this will be something that all the parties and all the voters can use to really stay on top of how elections work here.
If I could just commend you on this initiative and what you and Kim and Gretchen have done on this. I think this is a good opportunity. It's truly outreach to the community with a very community-minded organization with Arlington Independent Media, and I think can be the start of a long-lasting relationship. Thanks.
Yeah, so Kim, I don't know if you have anything you want to add, but otherwise, I guess the message is stay tuned. We'll be working on this hopefully soon and get it out there and get people educated on how elections are run.
Well, the only thing I have to say is that I'm really excited. I am a very visual person. I do media for a living, so I'm very excited to work on this and to start getting it out there, and so that people can learn more about how this works, and that know what you think you've heard that's not quite right, that this is really how it works. So I'm really excited about that.
And I think just in terms of a production schedule, we're probably going to use the primary as an opportunity to collect footage with the release in the fall. It's hard for us to do the two simultaneously, to both be producing content and then packaging it for the public while running an election. So.
Yep. Well, thank you, Gretchen, for helping take this on, and I look forward to seeing what we can do to get this out there.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, with that, I know Howard had a question, so we can return to him. And if there are any other questions from anyone, you go ahead and put your hand up or put them in the chat. And we'll start. Are you ready? Can we start with Howard, Matt?
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you. So I had a couple of quick questions on my favorite subject, which is renting voting equipment.
Mm-hmm.
So my understanding is that Unison has approved third-party users of their software. Have they put that approval in writing, or do they intend to do that on a case-by-case basis, or do we know how that's going to proceed?
I have an email from them, which is in writing. So.
Okay. Good. That's helpful. So Gretchen, you had mentioned that notwithstanding Unison's approval of third-party users, there was some logistical and cost issues, I assume associated with ballot preparation. Is that what you were referring to? Can you describe that a little bit?
Yeah, so I think there's some important notes when we talk about how much, so whoever rents the equipment would be responsible for paying for their own ballots to be printed, obviously. The Unison system requires ballots to be printed in 2 colors, black and red. The ovals for the office have to be in red ink. If you do them in black, the machines actually view them as a mark. The machines are programmed to not see red ink. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes.
And then the ballots have to be printed double-sided because the machine is going to look for barcodes and kind of those verification measures on both sides of the ballot. So even if you only had 2 names on the ballot, it's going to have to be in color and double-sided.
So your point being that it's just more expensive to print ballots given those requirements.
It will be, you're looking at 25 cents a ballot from most vendors. And it has to be on a certain thickness of paper.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's helpful.
But whoever you contract with the vendor is up to the party. So.
Got it. Thank you. I appreciate it. That was it.
Okay. So we do have to that end, the certification for the new version of the software for ranked choice voting is pending. Its next step is it needs to run through a mock election. And I don't know if the electoral board had any thoughts on us running that mock election or if, but we're trying to get it on the State Board of Elections May meeting for certification. So.
Yeah, so we would meet, was it April 27th? One of us would be part of this?
The 3, yeah, so there were the 3 dates in there, April 27th, 8th, or 9th, in a time, and we would need an electoral board member present for about 2 hours.
All right, so yeah, we'll schedule that and figure out who can do it.
Okay.
But I think that it's important to get this wrapped up so we can send it to the State Board of Elections and get it certified. So
yeah, and I think it's there are some benefits to participating in this mock election for the Department of Elections. So yeah. Okay, I will go ahead and reach back out to the vendor.
This will also help, if and when the county board passes an ordinance for ranked choice voting, we'd at least have the software issue taken care of.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. I don't know if anyone else has any other questions. I don't see anything in anyone's hands up or anything.
I don't see any hands up. So.
All right. Well, with that, I will move to adjourn our March 25th electoral board meeting. I don't believe we have anything scheduled for our next meeting, but obviously stay tuned for that if we decide we want to have one in April or May. But anyway, I move to adjourn tonight's meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor? Aye.
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 All right, thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
You
Thank
too.
you all.
Thank you.